thanks for tuning in to another episode of Brooks Crossing News. I'm your host, Mr. Beck. Who is your favorite superhero? Spider-Man? Catwoman? No, Batgirl? Superman? One of my favorites was Wolverine, and today we're going to discuss a woman who is a real-life Wolverine. Lee Redmond hasn't cut her fingernails since 1979. She currently holds the world record for the longest fingernails at a collective 8.6 meters. 8.6 meters. For all my math whizzes out there, tell me how many feet that is. Lee Redmond recently shared the story of how she broke her fingernails. It was in a tragic car accident. The first thing she said when she got out of the car wreck was, "Where are my fingernails? They're famous." She collected the fingernails and put them in a Ziploc baggie and now keeps them somewhere safe. I don't know about you, but I love a good life hack. Our next story is a life hack shared by a woman on Reddit. She shared a video of her cutting a watermelon using nothing but floss. You can use floss to cut a watermelon into perfect size and shape. The only key to note about this life hack is to make sure that you do not use minty floss. Our final story tonight comes from a dog owner who says he saw his dog come up with a clever plan to get his ball back. Richard, the other dog, picked up our dog's ball when he dropped it. When our dog went to go get the ball back, Richard would refuse. What our dog does next is very clever. He finds a boring old stick, but starts playing with it and jumping like it's the best thing ever. When Richard sees our dog playing with the stick, he decides he wants to drop the ball and go get the stick. Well, lo and behold, our dog goes and gets the ball back. Dogs can be warm, loving, and even clever. And now over to Mr. Beck with Lesson 90, Finding Unknown Measurements. Over to you, Mr. Beck.
Thank you, Mr. Beck. As Mr. Beck said, today we will be doing Lesson 90, Find Unknown Measures. The I can statement or the goal for the lesson is I can find the unknown measure of a side of a rectangle when given the perimeter or area. Fred has 30 yards of fencing to enclose a rectangular vegetable garden. He wants it to be 6 yards wide. How long will his vegetable garden be? So we know he has 30 yards of fencing to work with. So step 1, decide whether this problem involves area or perimeter. Well, if you think about it logically, he's trying to build a garden, right? He wants to put the fence around the garden. So we're trying to find out how much fence he has around the garden, the length. Then we know we're dealing with perimeter. It wouldn't make sense to put the fence inside the garden. That would be area, but the outside dimension would be the perimeter. So step 2, we're going to use a formula for perimeter. The width is 6, the perimeter is 30, the length is unknown. All right, so let's look at it over here in this diagram we have of Fred's garden. So the width is 6, width equals 6, and the length equals question mark. We don't know that yet. But we do know perimeter equals 30. So if this width over here is 6 and this is a rectangle, then we know this side must be 6. And whatever this side equals, this question mark, we know this question mark will be exactly the same. So think, the fencing goes around the outside of the garden. This is a measure of perimeter. Great, we established that. Here's step 2. We're using the formula. So they have P, or perimeter, equals 2 times L. Now they're doing 2 times L because, remember, we have 2 lengths since it's a rectangle. Plus 2 times width because we have 2 widths. Then they just replace what they know. They know that the perimeter is actually a 30, right? We decided perimeter is 30, so they plug that in. Equals 2 times L, we still don't know what L is, plus 2 times 6. They put this 6 here because we know that W, or width, is really a 6. So now they have 30, the perimeter, equals 2 times the length, right, because we have 2 sides that are going to be the length, plus 12. That's 6 plus 6. Now, since we already have 12 feet, or 12 yards rather, of fencing for the width, we have to take that away from the total amount of fencing we have. So he has 30 to work with. We know 12 of that is going to be dedicated to this side right here and to this side right here. So we're going to take away that 12, and we're left with 18. Right, so we'll take this 12 away. And now we're left with 18. That's our number. That's what we have left to work with. So we have 18 yards left, and now we have 2 L's, 2 lengths. And we know that these lengths are going to be identical. So what we can do is we can think what number times 2 will equal 18, or we can do 18 divided by 2, and that will equal 9. So the length will be 9. And we can always check our work by doing 9 plus 9 plus 6 plus 6. 9 plus 9 is 18. 6 plus 6 is 12. 18 plus 12 equals 30. And that's what we originally had to work with, right? We had 30 yards to work with. Great. Carol has 120 square inches of wood. The piece of wood is rectangular and has a height of 10 inches. How long is the base? So sometimes you're going to see they'll use this word width, and sometimes they'll use base. They use these words interchangeably. So step 1, decide whether this problem involves area or perimeter. Here's a big hint. See how it says square inches of wood? And there's our think. Square inches is a measure of area. So area equals base times height. So we're actually using area here, not perimeter. So now we have to use a formula for area. The height is 10, the area is 120, the length is unknown. So here's our height, 10. Our area is 120, right? We have that written right here. And that's in our problem because she has 120 square inches of wood to work with. So that's our total area. And the length is unknown. So we have area equals base times height. We know the area is 120, and we know the height is 10. And that's why they rewrote that like that. So now we have to think what number times 10 will give us 120. Or we could do 120 divided by 10. And that will give you 12. So 120 equals 12 times 10, or base times height. The value of B is 12. So the base of Carol's piece of wood is 12 inches. Let's try a few practice problems together. Alrighty, so we're going to do some practice problems on the whiteboard. I love the whiteboard. I have so much room to work. Number 1. Here we have a rectangle. So we know that the height is 5. So I'm going to put that height equals 5. And I know the perimeter equals 40. Okay, so now it becomes a game of filling in the blanks. I don't know what the width is, right? I don't know what that is. But I know if this side's 5 over here, if this side's 5, I know this side over here must also be 5. Okay, so now I already have taken away 10 inches. So 40 minus the 10 I've already used gives me 30. So I have 30 left to work with. And I have two sides, right? Because this question mark will be identical. So whatever this side ends up being, this side has to be exactly the same. So if I have 30 left and I have two sides to work with, I'm going to do 30 divided by 2 since I know they have to be exactly the same. And that's going to give me 15. We can check that by doing 15 plus 15. It gives me 0, carry the 1, and I have 30. Good, so I checked it. So I know then that this side and this side then must be 15. Now I'm just going to check to make sure it adds up to 40, right? Because my perimeter is 40, and that's the outside dimension of the rectangle. So 15 plus 15 plus 5 plus 5. I'm actually going to pair these off. I'm going to do 15 plus 5 gives me 20. And 15 plus 5 gives me 20. And 20 plus 20 gives me 40. And that's the number I originally had to work with. So the width then is 15. But not just 15, 15 inches. Don't forget the unit. Great. Let's go on to number 2. Alright, so we have a rectangle. We know the width, but we have to find the height. So I already know we already know that we're going to be doing area because we see that they gave us the area. So I'm going to write my equation for area, which is area equals base times height. So I know area I'm going to plug in as 72. Base I'm going to plug in as 8. And height I don't know. So now I have to think, what number times 8 gives me 72? There's a few ways you could go about this. You may know this math fact already. If you don't, think about all of the multiples of 8 that you know. And think of one that might be near 72. Like right off the jump, I know 8 times 8 is going to give me 64. That's pretty close to 72. How about 8 times 7? That gives me 56. So it's not down. Let's go up. 8 times 9. That one gave me 72. So this then, the height must be 9. The other way you could solve that is you could do 72 divided by 8. Depending on strategies you know for division, you could find that this number will be 9. So area equals base times height. 72 equals 8 times 9. Does that make sense? Does 72 equal 8 times 9? If it does, we got it right. So our height here will be 9 feet. You're going to have a few practice problems on a Google form. Some of them will be perimeter, some of them will be area, and you'll see that they may use base, height, width, length interchangeably. But you're trying to find the missing dimension using what you already have. If you have additional scrap paper, you do not have to submit it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Beck. I hope you enjoyed another episode of Brooks Crossing News. Ignite your passions and brighten the way. Lee Redmond hasn't cut her nails since 1979. Whoa. The ball back. Just like that. Can you stop it and start your room because it's too much sometimes. Who says he saw his dog come up with a clever plan to get his dog ball back. Dog ball? It doesn't have to be a dog ball, it could just be a ball. I don't know about you, but I'm feeling 22. Just let it run. And it was in a car accident. It's good, but I can't stumble. I can't chop it. It doesn't work.
Well,
So, was that a good intro?
yes, I did. But do you want me to delete it now?
That's right, you can use the watermelon to cut the floss. Right. That makes sense.